Nick Hanna started his journey in the health and fitness industry over 10 years ago. After suffering some serious injuries during his sporting days, Nick fell in love with the gym and training. Over a number of years, he was exposed to people who competed in the sport of bodybuilding and decided to compete himself for the first time in 2017. Since this time, he has competed in over 10 shows. Nick coaches clientele whilst juggling a full-time job as an accountant and prides himself on managing natural bodybuilding while staying on track with his career and family.
Thought
Alrighty,
twice,
Nick.
thought twice about taking a piss there. Sorry.
All good, bud. Good time to join us on the podcast, mate. A&B Pro, NBA Pro, about to welcome your first child into the world with your wife Olivia. It's an exciting
Yep.
time for you to be on this earth at the moment, isn't it, mate?
Oh, it's a bit of a whirlwind, to be honest, at the minute. Coming off the back of the comp season, which obviously we'll delve into, but it was an awesome year. And to top it off, to be sort of welcoming a newborn in the new year, it's pretty amazing. So, yeah, it's an awesome time, and I'm pretty grateful to have the opportunities and the people around me to be doing what I love, which is awesome.
To go back to back to back to back with all these comps, I think you know NBA, AMB into the NBA comps, and then to go over to the States to do the WNBF Worlds.
Yeah.
Um, it must be nice to now be able to enjoy some food and tuck into some Christmas pudding or festivities. What did you guys get up to on Christmas Day?
Yeah, absolutely. We are actually just down at Olivia's family's place down in Colac in for Christmas, so it was nice just to sort of have that relaxation
Yeah.
time after sort of a full year of prep. 5 shows, and have that ability to sort of just hang out, relax, spend time with family, and not have to worry about tracking a macro, tracking your sodium, tracking your water, and all of that kind of thing, and not stressing if you miss a step or you miss a training session or that kind of thing. So it's nice to have that sort of, take the foot off slightly, albeit sort of, spending time with family is probably the most important thing there.
And so I was actually going through your Instagram and saw that you and Olivia were smashing the food in New York, eating your way through New York. Mate, those ice cream sandwiches with the rainbow was it bread
Oh,
in the middle
th-
look
they're
crazy.
actually bagels. They're actually bagels, with cream cheese in the middle. Unbelievable. I think that's the one thing that New York does exceptionally well is the bagels. And one thing that here in Melbourne and here in Australia that we don't do overly well is bagels, that's for sure. Like they're on another level, the bagels there in New York. So we definitely enjoyed some delicious food over there, which is pretty awesome.
What was your pick when it came to the food over there? What was
The bagels were up there. The pizza was excellent, but the square sort of thicker pizza was excellent. Cat's Deli, I'm sure you've probably seen it online.
yeah,
The
yeah.
pastrami sandwich, that was a winner for me. So I mean, all of those combined, you
I
can't
saw
really
the
go
grin on your
wrong.
face with that one.
Now that I think about it, I'm just like, oh gosh, there's like if only I could have one of those right now. They were unreal.
Crazy to be like that food focus coming, especially towards the back end of a prep. Like it's funny, isn't it? For people who have never actually done a bodybuilding prep, it's probably hard to kind of empathize. But for those that have been through that process of getting to ridiculously low body fat percentages, like just how much you enjoy that food at the back end of prep is often something that a lot of people can't quite appreciate, can they?
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things is post comp is you actually just then don't, and even all through us as bodybuilders, you then don't know what your hunger cues are like. Like you actually don't know if you're actually hungry, or is it just because your eyes are bigger than your stomach, or you're actually hungry. So you probably lose that ability to really make that informed decision as to if you are really that hungry, which does make it challenging. And to be sort of away post comp wasn't easy, and I probably wouldn't recommend it for majority of people. Being back in your routine, being back at home post comp is probably going to be where you see the best results post comp. But I wouldn't change it for the world though.
there's heaps of things I want to unpack, Nick, coming into, I guess, after that comp season you've had now. One of those things is the novelty, I guess, of you being a chartered accountant and working 9 to 5. A lot of the previous guests we've had on the podcast have been coaches. So a lot of the time they'll probably schedule their day around their clientele and they have the flexibility to train when they want to. And I think that's very relatable for, I guess, most of the population would be, working under their employer and their hours are dictated by their employer. So I guess one of the things I want to discuss with you is some of the tips and strategies that you utilized in order to successfully achieve your pro cards in the NBA already and AMB and likely in the future WNBF. How have you got to that point working 9 to 5 and kind of juggling bodybuilding around those hours?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I suppose for anyone listening that doesn't know, I've worked as an accountant for a bit over 7 years now. It was 7 years in November, and all whilst training, eating my meals, all of that. So I came out of uni doing a bachelor of a double degree in economics and accounting, and then dove straight into a grad role as an accountant. And I've worked my way up, and I'm actually a senior manager at an accounting firm right now. And it's, I suppose, what it has done for me, it's really set that routine, that regime for me, knowing that whilst between these hours, and what I actually do enjoy about the accounting world is that I can go to work and not talk about bodybuilding for 8 hours, as opposed to, obviously, no slide on any online coaches or anything. I think it's fantastic, but they're talking bodybuilding, they're talking health, training, nutrition, all of that all through the day, then they go into the gym themselves. Whereas I literally have a block in the middle of the day. I don't talk about bodybuilding. I don't talk about any of that for the most part, which I find quite refreshing and then makes it so then when I am, in the gym, that's my time. That's my time to train. But going back, I think setting the routine, the regime of, you wake up, you have your meals, you have them set throughout the day where you can eat at a desk. So I often say probably the best bodybuilding job, sitting at a desk all day where I can just sit there, eat my meals, etc. I'm then able to plan myself out where I can leave at X time, I can go train, I can come home and not have to worry about anything else. So I think a big one there, tip wise, is like you've got to prep your stuff. You've got to be prepared throughout the day and know that you're eating at XYZ times. Now, I know that can be difficult in jobs and roles where you may not have set breaks and the people around you may not understand what you're doing, which has probably been a bit of an evolution for me. So given that I've been at the current firm for quite a while, I've built that rapport with them. I've built those relationships and people understand what I do outside of obviously the work. I've worked at the same firm and I've done the 2019 prep, I've done my 2021 prep, and now obviously 2024 last year's prep. And they understand what I do. Obviously, it causes for a bit of, flexibility in terms of, meeting times. If I have something that has to go after hours or it's earlier in the day or it crosses lunchtime, those kind of things. I'm having to, move things around. I might have to have a meal a bit earlier or a bit later. I might have to swap my training day around from tonight to tomorrow, or I might have to train early in the morning before work at stupid o'clock just to make sure I get my session in for that day. So I think you've got to probably plan ahead and have that flexibility and foresight into what your day is going to look like and map that out, so you can really, make sure that you tick all the boxes that you need to. And I suppose throughout the entire year, it was about ticking those boxes, for the entire prep.
Are you a morning trainer or evening?
Ideally, evening. Ideally, evening.
So do you utilize any caffeine? This is something I think that a lot of people relate to because after hours after work, obviously, particularly in prep where your sleep's likely already impacted.
Mhm. Caffeine wise, I tend, especially when I'm training in the evening, I don't take caffeine during the evening. Obviously, I don't want to impede sleep. I actually, thankfully, didn't need it. Obviously, I'm taking caffeine throughout the morning, through the day, but it's almost like, and I don't know how to put it, but it's like as soon as I left work, have that 10-minute walk to the gym, it sort of gives me that. like little extra spurt of energy, knowing that all right, that's the day done. Now it's my time to train. Now it's my time to get after it. So yes, obviously energy levels slip and dip, but I sort of manage that accordingly. So I'm able to, get to the gym at a reasonable hour. Probably still got a bit of caffeine in my system from the, midday energy drink. But yeah, sort of sees me through the day. So I think that's a big one is making sure that you're not impacting your sleep because if you do, that's sort of where you go down that slippery slope. And all of a sudden you're not getting good sleep. You then having to take more caffeine the next day and it's never a good outcome.
Yeah, and so the Renaissance periodization diet priority pyramid, and then Eric Helms's muscle and strength pyramid for nutrition, they both kind of state that nutrient timing isn't as important as things like meeting your macros. Those really what would you say more low hanging fruit, or those more important things would be hitting your protein intake across the day, right? Um, but 3 to 5 hour window, have you found that a challenge, as you say, going into meetings and that kind of thing, eating at consistent intervals throughout the day?
Um, yes, I have found it challenging, and at times you might have to put two meals together. At times you might have to have only an hour between these meals, knowing that you're going to have a 5 hour gap where you're not going to be able to eat. So, whilst I say the answer is yes, it is challenging. I've sort of have that ability to kind of manipulate my day around that, knowing that I'm going to be free at these times where I can eat.
And we're like, as a society, we're more sedentary than ever before.
Absolutely.
Rates of cardiovascular disease, obviously, as modern medicine and technology improves, people are living longer, but with a lot of comorbidities. And a lot of that is due to the nature of our lifestyles. What would you say for someone, who does work a 9 to 5, struggles to manipulate their body composition with a very sedentary role? Do you do like structured cardio, or are you monitoring your steps? What would be your philosophy around that?
Yeah, good question. Actually, both. Cardio was in for the majority of the prep. Probably pulled it out about, I think it was about 8 weeks from the first show, and then we just didn't implement it back after that for fatigue management purposes. But it was 10K steps daily. Not I say it's not strictly monitored, but it was not as if I ever didn't hit 10K. So the way I was able to hit those, so I would obviously plan out my day and know that I would potentially do some steps at home in the morning on the treadmill if need be, whether it's 10 to 20 to 30 minutes. I would also then get off at a train station that's before the one that I need to, so then walk another 10, 15 minutes to work. I would then spend my hour lunch break at least going for a 20 to 30-minute walk. And then equally on the way home, whether it was I walk home from the train station, I'm walking to the gym, it became very easy to hit my 10K steps. Like tomorrow when I'm at work, I probably won't need to actively do steps. I'll just get them surrounding work, walking to work, walking to the station, that kind of thing. So it hasn't been too challenging in that respect. But if you can plan it out, I think it's quite easy to hit that.
Would you say that the routine nature of your career and lifestyle at the moment eliminates a lot of decision fatigue, which actually helps you succeed with achieving the body composition required to be stage ready?
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. So that decision fatigue, I think, is a huge one, and not to discredit anyone that follows macros or as opposed to meal plans or anything like that. But the way that I set it up during the week is, I've got my set meals. I take them to work. Like I'm not even thinking what I'm having tomorrow for breakfast because I know what it's going to be. I just need to do it. I don't need to think about it. I know what my meal two is. I know what my meal three is. I know what my meal four is. I've got them there ready to go and I don't need to think about it. It's almost not even a question. So, in respect to then, you talked about earlier about sort of the caffeine pre workout and anything like that. I know that I'm going into my session and I'm training tonight. So, there's not even a question. So, I'm going to go have a good session. So, there's no decision, there's no fatigue surrounding that. It's like, I'm going to go train tonight. And that's the end of it.
So the next thing that I want to discuss, mate, is the social side of bodybuilding. When you're in a comp prep scenario, a lot of imagine what you do as a team with your work is going out for lunches, in between hours,
Hmm.
or whether it be, dinners or drinks on a Friday night. How do you navigate those social settings when you're, in a corporate environment?
Yeah, it's a huge one, and often, and this is probably the biggest struggle, if I'll be honest. So I suppose you split that up into two aspects. I think the first one being the drinking aspect, particularly an after hours drinks and that kind of thing. I think the stigma around drinking and people not drinking has sort of changed over the last few years. I don't know if you feel the same. So a lot of people just don't drink anymore, and that's totally fine. And I think I'm surrounded by people that equally don't drink or don't drink heavily. And what's the difference between me sitting there with a soda water or a Pepsi Max versus a beer? Like there actually isn't. So it's more so around the social interactions as opposed to the drink itself. So yeah, I don't think the drinking necessarily plays as much of a part. The other one is the food. The food, obviously, you go out for lunches, you go out for meals, you go to events, and there's meals there. I suppose I'm lucky in the respect that people around me kind of know what I go through, and they've seen me do that before, and just know that okay, I'm not eating. I'll come still and socialize with everyone, but I'm not eating today, and just being clear with that. So, I mean, it can easily be done regardless of where you are working or anything like that. I think you just need to be upfront with them and be comfortable with your decision that that's it. I'm, preparing for something that's bigger than, a Palmer at the pub on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. It's almost like conditioning people. Like once you set your expectation, people's expectations or
Hmm.
perspective on the way you do things, it kind of, if the more and more you do it, it reinforces that concept of that association that, Nick is on prep, he's just not
Yep.
going to eat. So they stop asking you. I think the hard part is when you kind of let that slide a little bit. Oh, I'll just have one beer. That's all right. And then they kind of don't know where you're at with things. So
Yep.
making it very clear, you are in a bodybuilding prep. This is kind of what it entails. But as you say, there are often ways around things, right? So like having a Diet Coke or Pepsi Max or something, a low calorie alternative. Um, have you ever gone out and just kind of gone off the menu and gone, right, well, my meal five is 250 grams of barramundi and 50 grams of green beans or whatever it may be, 100 grams of rice. I'm just going to get the barramundi and kind of sub that in, or is this something that you would probably preface? It really depends on the timeline about how close you are to the prep, and when would you sort of go, right? This is where I'm kind of locking in now. There's no um,
Yeah.
changes occurring in my diet.
Um, I'm just trying to think back. I don't think I did that once on this prep last year. Actually, that's a lie. I did it once. We were up in Noosa for my birthday in end of June, and I got a steak, and that's it from the pub.
Yeah.
We had a steak while we were watching the footy for my birthday, and I feel like that was the only time that I had a meal that I didn't cook
Yeah.
through the whole prep. But obviously, if you're just in, regular off season, or if you're in like a mini cut, or you're just dieting, then I would say absolutely you can obviously make the smart decision when you are out. But equally, when you are out and if you're having to ask the waiter or the chef to make all these alterations to the meal, it's kind of like you're just too much of a hassle. And I'd almost prefer just to not even go down that path. And I think I think you talk about the decision fatigue and the stresses around that respect. That almost creates more stress
Yeah.
to to look at the menu ahead of time and be like, oh, what's that going to be like? What's the fat content in that? Have they cooked it in butter? Have they cooked it in oil? Like, what are the calories in this? Do I need how many carbs is this? How many grams is this? Do I need to bring my scales? Like that stress, I think, far outweighs
Yeah.
anything to just say, no, I'm not going to eat. I'll eat before I come or I'll eat after I come.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. When it comes to your trainer or your coach, AJ Morris, we've had Jack Radford Smith on the podcast, and he's also a client of AJ's.
Hmm.
What kind of principles has he instilled with you, both training wise and nutrition? Maybe we start with the principles of training and what you've kind of learnt from him.
Yeah, I think he's sort of not that I from when we start. So we started together in I think it was June of 2022. So it's been about 2.5 years now. And the fundamental principles of intensity within sets and actually managing, things like volume across the week, across exercises, across sessions, I think has been a huge one for me. And actually picking exercises in, order that makes sense from a, mechanical point of view, and what's going to get the most out of me. So he's refined a lot of movements for me, and the improvements in the physique have been night and day. I'm not saying I'm weaker now than I was previously, but the way I'm moving loads is just night and day, I think. So, yeah, he's been amazing in terms of critiquing execution, and yeah, laying out my training, being so on top of those kind of things. Because I know that there's coaches out there that might not even look at training form feedback or clips or anything, even if someone's in an off season. But I honestly think that's the biggest thing that you need to be doing as a coach is watching someone train if you're not there in person with them, because you just can't see how they're executing movements. And that's honestly how you then growing and building the muscle that you need to be in whatever phase that you're in.
What particular area have you needed to improve on since your 2019 prep?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest shots was my rear double. And whether it's been, all through myself when I was training prior to AJ, I was, deadlifting very heavy. I got very strong at deadlifting. Pretty quickly after we started working together, we stopped deadlifting and we did like a SLDL, a block SLDL, an RDL, those kind of things. Hyperextension movements that are actually working the posterior chain as opposed to a deadlift, which kind of was for me, but it wasn't growing my back, it wasn't growing my glutes, it wasn't growing my hamstrings. So that's probably been one of the main shots that we had to improve, and we certainly have. But equally, some of the feedback from judges this past year at Worlds was you kind of just need to be bigger everywhere. And I think that's the majority of people, to be truthful. So the split and the exercise spread across all body parts sort of, reflects that at the minute as well.
The early phases of bodybuilding, I think everyone goes through that phase where their ego kind of takes over a little bit. And I think you really play into your strengths as opposed to your weaknesses a lot of the time. And I think I've done a lot of conventional deadlifting, but I've started with this next block. I've gone back into like block pulls and
Yep.
doing a lot more hamstrings now because I have realized a similar thing where my hamstrings aren't as well developed as say like my upper back and erector spinae and that. So obviously I'm
Yep.
using a lot of my back with those conventional deadlifts, but I'm really not. I haven't been developing my hamstrings as well. So I think sometimes it's a good thing. I'm sure you would agree that you give someone else the reins to kind of and get another perspective on something that you're not objectively seeing. It's good to have a coach in that sense because they can objectively pull apart maybe things you're not doing so well or things you can improve upon to build upon those weaknesses coming into your next
Absolutely.
things.
Like, who doesn't love putting up a clip on Instagram of you pulling however many
Yeah,
plates off the ground, deadlifting? So, yeah, it's a bit of a kill to the ego, but I think, it pays off in the long run.
sure. Nutrition wise, what is it? I know Jack actually experimented with some fat loading coming into a couple of his peaks, or maybe one of them. But was this something that AJ trialed with you, or what kind of philosophies did he have around peaking?
Yeah, it was. I think the biggest myth I think with peaking is that everything has to change or a lot has to change. Now, I did 5 shows this year. The first 4 of them were within 5 weeks. And then between the first show and the last show was 10 weeks. So we knew that we weren't going to be 100% peeled for that first show. So therefore, it was kind of like we didn't really need to do much in the peaking process. We sort of, I think a lot of the process is, firstly the nutrition side, but equally the fatigue management, the drop off in fatigue is a huge one. So, a reduction in training volume in the lead up, a reduction in step count in the lead up, obviously pulling cardio if that's still in. But from a nutrition point of view, it was a slow titrate up of carbohydrates. It was nothing major. Yeah, there was no, massive burgers or anything the night before the show or anything or the morning of. So the first couple shows were like that. I can't remember if it was one of the Brisbane shows that I did. I can't remember if it was NBA Nationals or it was WNBF. It might have been the day before. He thought that we might have, oh no, it was 2 days before. We might have spilled just a little bit. So he just pulled back and we just did a bit higher fats the next day and just pulled down on carbohydrates, which gave us, an excellent look regardless. So, it was pretty similar for all the other shows, and a titrate up of carbohydrates. We did the same thing for Worlds in Brisbane, sorry, in Boston as well. Maybe a bit more aggressive, purely because we were leaner, and we could fill up and afford to fill up a bit more, particularly because it was the last show. But there was no real manipulation there. There was nothing overly major. Things like sodium, things like water, all of that remained consistent. We had the blueprint down. In our Google Sheets, we had our NBA peak, our A and B peak, we had WMBF peak. We had them all lined up, and we had the data there. We knew that on 6 days out, this was what we did. This is what our step count was. This is what we, some notes on what our meals were and that kind of thing, and our, macros were. So we had the blueprint there, and it was just about rinsing and repeating that. So once we got it sorted for the first show, it was pretty much an easy process. I say the peak week.
So yeah, you did a fair few of peaks back to back to back.
Yep.
But in doing so, you were traveling a lot too, right? You
Yep.
obviously went to the States, you flew up to Queensland. So I think you're a perfect proponent to extract a bit of information about what worked, what didn't work so well in certain instances, whether it be, impacting your circadian rhythm, your sleep quality, jumping around to different gyms and having to work out, what machines might work best for certain movements. Because I know you're very much like a machine-based guy as well. You like a lot of
Yep.
plate-loaded machines and that kind of thing. So obviously, different gyms have the equipment has very different feels and
Absolutely. So I suppose touch on the Brisbane shows first. So that was the first one was WNBF Australia, and then a week later we went back to Brisbane for NBA Nationals, which obviously you did that as well, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah. So obviously the travel up to Brisbane, a 2 hour flight doesn't really do a hell of a lot. I can't even remember if there was a time difference at that point. So yeah, it didn't really make too much of a difference those travel days. My advocate is, at least go 2 days prior, ideally, to the show, or yeah, probably 2 days prior would be my go-to, particularly for a couple-hour flight. In terms of gyms, I sort of knew that there were gyms up there, like your world gyms up in Queensland that were able to get those training sessions in. I typically, in the days prior to the show, like 1 day out or 2 days out, my sessions were pretty low key. They were devolume sessions, so they were nothing too major. I can kind of make do with,
yeah.
sessions, as long as they've got a few, they had all the machines you needed, as long as you have the session structure laid out, whether it's a lateral, a chest press, a pull down, a row, a shoulder press, like it was kind of pretty stock standard. So it wasn't too bad in terms of finding gyms whilst, up in Brisbane. Neither was it in Boston either. We found a really good gym over in Boston that we could train at. That AJ was training at. All the competitors were generally training there, so it was a good one there to train at. I think that probably the hardest part, with the travels and the circadian rhythm, the food, all of that was that sort of Melbourne to Boston trip. Memory. It was sort of leave on a Monday morning at call it 11 a.m. and then land in Boston late Monday night, but it's been an extra 24 hours. So
Yeah.
that really, really throws you off and probably hit us for six when we did arrive. And there was a bit of a few delays and all of that, which was a bit of a nightmare. But, at least we were prepared for it, to say the least.
I guess it all makes part of the story, right?
It does. It does. And I think when I reflect on the season, to say that I was able to, obviously go to Brisbane a couple of times, go to Boston, and effectively live the travel bodybuilding lifestyle and not miss a beat through all of that. Like it's pretty cool to say that I've done that, and it's all part of the experience, I'd say.
I think Wall did he went to the WMBF Worlds as well, and I think he had a nightmare with his traveling as well. I think he missed his flight.
Yeah, we did the same.
Yeah, he missed his flight, and then I think he had to pay. He had to fork out for a second ticket and get the next flight.
Oh no.
But ended up winning, and getting some fantastic results and achievements as well. So, yeah, I guess that's all part of the memories right now. It comes into the, what was 2024 for you? Um, yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all just sort of in the rear view mirror, those kind of things, and you sort of think about and laugh about at the time. But I'm just thinking back to when we were sitting at the airport and thinking, oh gosh, we've missed that flight. We're waiting here for another 6 hours, like that kind of thing, and you're stressing out all day. So yeah, it's all forgotten about, it's all laughed about now, but not at the time.
I guess at that point in time, a lot of the workouts you're doing weren't, like, as you say, more like pump based workouts, high repetitions, just pushing blood into the muscle. Um, would you say that it's probably a better time to travel when you're, well, not a better time, but it's when you're peaking, it's probably training wise, probably easier than it would be if you're in the context of like an off season and you're trying to overload in those small, like extra rep or micro loading with weight or whatever it may be is going to be something that you really want to drill down on, making sure you're in the right environment, the same equipment week in, week out. Like when you're doing a pump session, you don't really need, like you can get away with just doing a cable lateral raise if you don't have the lateral raise.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I even think even during a contest prep, not the week out, obviously, but let's say you're 10 weeks out, you're 12 weeks out, you're wanting to go into sessions knowing that on this machine last week I did 3 plates for 8 reps. Today I need to match those reps. But then all of a sudden, if you're traveling that week and then you miss that rotation, then it's 3 weeks later, you've dropped a couple kilos since you've done that session before and you haven't done that movement, that's when you might, regress on numbers and that kind of thing. And you prefer to stay in routine and stay at the same gym. So I almost think it was, I traveled a bit through this prep for other things as well. So I found it was actually earlier on in the prep where
Or
it was
challenge.
hard. Yeah. So like, I think it was, as I said before, when we were in Noosa, that was, I think about 12 weeks out, give or take. The gyms there that were trained at wasn't terrific. And I would have preferred to, be trained in my sort of, standard
And you're trying to
gyms.
preserve that muscle mass, like in the midway through
Exactly.
prep, when you're really trying to hold on to every
Hmm.
gram of muscle you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're trying to make those micro gains each week, trying to maintain and hold on to those numbers. And if you're in different gyms, different kits, you just can't. Or you can't you try and replicate those sessions, but it's never going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, I think that I was reading a RP article, Renaissance Periodization article before on, and I was looking at, because when I was coming into this discussion with you, I wanted to bring up, that topic of for traveling. I know you do with work, but also the trips you made across these states. But they had a similar perspective on it's exceptionally easier to maintain with training and diet when you're traveling than it is to
Hmm.
try and build or be in a deficit. So I think that
Absolutely.
seems to be a common consensus there.
I even think just on that, yeah, I think even when traveling outside of a prep, like you kind of then almost don't, even if you're in like a deep off season, you kind of want to just be maintaining body weight because the sessions that you are doing are probably just going to be maintenance sessions and they're not actually progressive. So a lot of like if I coach a few of the clients that I coach, if they're traveling or anything like that, I almost want them to devolume or even just
Yeah.
take those days off. If you're traveling for 4 or 5 days over the weekend or a long weekend, probably just take those sessions off because the reality is any gym that you do get to is probably going to be subpar anyway. So you might as well just take those days off and come back fresh when you return home.
Like have a diet break back to maintenance or something, or a deload week with training just makes it a little bit easier in that context.
Absolutely, and just almost pause the progressions for the time being, and we'll just pick back up next week when you come home.
Yeah. And that's that. I saw a post that you just put up. I think it was a couple of days ago. You were down in, where was it?
I was in
Bayswater, Powerhouse Bayswater.
Yes, I was.
That's
Yep.
where you're doing the block pulls. I saw that post you put up.
Yep.
Um, One guy I used to train, not with, but I was fond of at Kingdom Gym down in Brookvale, was Nick Coddy. He used to bounce around all the different gyms around the Northern Beaches.
Mhm.
A very passionate natural bodybuilder too, but I think a lot of people would resonate with that post that you put up about, like, you enjoy exploring different gyms and different equipment. So how much more enjoyable is that now that you're not in a severe calorie deficit, that you can now, see where you want to train and set up for your next block. I'm sure AJ has a big say in that as well, but you have some input in terms of what you think feels good or what's working.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've obviously got the main couple gyms that I do train at. So I have a push pull legs rotation at both of the two gyms that I mainly train at. So whether I'm, in the city for work, I'll train at one gym, or if I'm at home, I'll train closer to home. But as far as then exercise selections go, I effectively said these are my sessions that I'm currently doing. These are the, particular movements that I think I would like to do right now. And AJ would sort of, order them or say, yeah, that's a good idea for now, or no, maybe let's hold off for a bit longer. Order them, rep ranges, exercise selections, that kind of thing, exercise cues, and he sort of monitors on that respect. But equally, I like to try and keep in a routine as much as possible. But equally, the gym scene in Melbourne or Victoria, I'm not sure how much you've sussed it around the area, but there's a lot of good gyms around. And that's sort of one of my things I like to do on the weekend is just, travel to a new gym or one that I haven't been to a while. So obviously I went to Bayswater the other day because I could and I had a bit of time. So I love exploring gyms and loving seeing, what different kit there is. I'm a sucker for new gym equipment and seeing what's good, which is equally why I love traveling to, overseas and finding all the different, the gyms over there.
What was your pick? I guess Powerhouse, Bayswater. You've also got like the World gyms down there. Is there any
Yeah.
particular gym that you're really fond of or enjoy the most?
Um, Obviously, so Powerhouse Bayswater and Powerhouse South Morang is probably the main one that I train at close to home. I train at Doherty's in the city. During
Doherty's, yeah, that was the other one.
Yeah, Doherty's in the city during the week. There's a lot of good ones. Like obviously, One Gym's very good. Into Performance is very good. There's a bunch of newer ones that have popped up that I can't. We were talking on a podcast the other week about them. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I'm gonna have to suss them all out. There's obviously all the Derriments around and all of that,
Yep.
which are huge. But yeah, it just depends on what I can travel to and get to in a close proximity, I suppose.
All right. So I guess one of the things that is really exciting for you coming up now, obviously your child, but also now that you're a pro with the NBA, A&B, you're starting to align yourself more with these federations, and you're looking to do some judging with A&B in the new season A competitions. Between both those federations, A&B and NBA, which is a much newer federation in the Australian natural bodybuilding space at the moment. What things have you enjoyed and maybe have been done differently between those federations and your experience as a competitor?
Yeah, good one. So across the season, I think what NBA did super well is the amount of shows they did across all the different states. You know, obviously we had all the like I obviously did the Victorian show. You did the South Coast.
Yeah, so they actually invited me down to that as a bit of a. I actually wasn't going to do that one, but they
Okay.
gave me free registration and said come on down, and so I actually enjoyed that one. That was good. It was a little bit of a primer for the what was to come. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought they did a good job in that respect.
Yeah, and they obviously did a great job with nationals, and then obviously they did the Bali show, which I was tempted to do, but I just thought with the close proximity to Boston, I wasn't going to venture over to Bali for that show. I thought nationals was enough. But I think NBA do a great job with the promotion of their shows. The venues, both shows that I went to, I know that they've actually got a new Victorian venue for this upcoming season, but even the clock tower they always run things smoothly. I'll never forget, I did NBA for the first time in 2021, and I think that might have been close to their first Victorian show, and just the way that they actually cared about their athletes, and really, ran their show smoothly. That's probably the big one. They ran their show so smoothly, ran to time. I don't know if anyone knows about bodybuilding shows. Inherently, they just go behind
Always late.
time, always late. But to their word, they nailed things. So, big props to them.
That's actually a
Um,
good point you raised there because that is one of the biggest things that I think kill people on the day is just like
mhm,
pumping up too early or spilling over with carbs or whatever, like because you're delayed so long, like you're not sure whether you need to fill up more or have any more
mhm.
sodium.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like, do I need to get my tan touched up? Do I need to get my glaze on? That kind of thing. Like, how much longer till I'm on stage is the biggest question you get asked backstage. But anyway, yeah, NBA do a great job at that. From an A and B perspective, I think the whole crew there, they're really progressing in terms of building out A and B because obviously they were a bit quiet for a bit there. But yeah, people like Tom, Jen, I know Mitch at Matrix Media, he's doing a great job with the socials
Yeah.
there. So the promotion there is awesome. And the way they're really putting back to their athletes. And I think something that both feds have done super well is trying to promote the whole natural bodybuilding side of things in respect of, like I got
Drug
tested
test.
yeah,
Yep.
the drug test. I got tested at VIX for both NBA and A and B. I also got tested at nationals as well. So, that hopefully weans out any not natural
Yep.
competitors. But the fact that they're actually doing it because I first competed in 2017 and I'll never forget this in another federation and there was a room backstage that had drug testing on the wall and you open the door and it's an empty room. Like it
Yeah.
was just a sign there to say, oh, we're drug testing. We're actually not.
It was like Coles when they put on their shop storefront window, like we're monitoring, we've got cameras, surveillance. Still, they've got like a 40% stop loss for stock loss.
Yeah. So the fact that they're actually yeah, drug testing now and yeah, all winners seem to get drug tested, which is a great thing. Pros even out of season they're drug testing them. So, whatever you can do to, keep it as legitimate as possible, natural bodybuilding, I think is can only be beneficial. I think I think there's almost the stigma or overshadowing of natural bodybuilding that a lot of people in the community are like, are they actually natural? Are they really natural?
Yeah. Bullshit. Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I think that's one of the things I would love to build that community of natural bodybuilding because whilst there are several federations around, and what like obviously some people prefer some federations over others, and that's each to their own. But I think we should be, coming together because people can compete like you, like I can compete in multiple federations. It doesn't just have to be one federation. So, coming together and whether it's a uniformed approach, I don't know, or it's yeah, somehow there's a uniform body that, can test across the board and make sure that, it's the same test across every single federation. I know the WMBF, I don't know how much you know about this, but WMBF Australia, they do require polygraph tests.
Oh, as well. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so everyone, before you actually compete, you've got to pass a polygraph. So how accurate are polygraphs? I don't know. Are they, obviously they can't be 100% accurate, but is that not a deterrent in itself? Like the fact that you're having to sit there, basically do a lie detector before you even compete a few days before. So I had to do that for the Australia show. I had to do that for the Boston Worlds as well. And every single competitor has to do it, regardless of whether you've done it before. As long as you've done it within 6 weeks of the comp, you've got to do a polygraph test. Then all winners and pro card winners and class winners have to do urine tests as well. I even think at Worlds they might have been doing blood tests as well. I think I saw that backstage. So if there can be some form of like uniformity across the board, that would be awesome. But I think the fact that they're doing urine tests and polygraph tests, whether that's a deterrent in itself, I think is, a positive in its own right.
Yeah. You look at like Micah Hearn and Simeon Panda and that, and I think both of those guys, don't quote me on this, but might have passed polygraph tests, and then that's
Hmm.
like they hang their hat on that. I'm a natural because of that. And then still get a lot of stigma and that kind of thing online. Um, yeah, I think one of the most challenging things I think with the natural bodybuilding is a lot of people think, all right, most of the guys in this federation are probably taking something anyway. So what's the point of me competing against cheats when I can just start taking drugs and go up to the IFBB and then can compete in an untested federation? Have you ever had, thoughts like that have crossed your mind of like, well, I've got a career as an accountant. If I start taking PEDs, it's going to open up this whole new can of worms. It's going to create, you've now got a child, full-time career, bodybuilding, but then you've also got to go and get your bloods routinely checked and make sure that your blood pressure and everything's in check. Is it just create a whole new set of variables that you feel like you can't contend with? Or are you just a purist in terms of natural bodybuilding is something you've always looked up to people in the sport, and this is something you've always wanted to do?
I think you ask that question to any natural bodybuilder, and they'd be lying to say that they have never thought about it.
Yeah.
Of course, it's something you think about and have thought about numerous like over the years. I think I probably, delved more into the natural bodybuilding space, particularly over the last couple of years, more so. And that's where my heart lies. Now, it's something I've always said, and it's probably, slightly outdated, this comment for me, is that, before this year, I'd never won a show, or before the last season, I'd never won a show. I'd always said, if I can't win a natural show, what makes you think that me taking PEDs means that I'm going to go win a enhanced show?
Yeah.
And it's not as if, winning an IFBB pro card would open up any doors for me or anything in that respect. Just like A&B and NBA pro cards hasn't necessarily opened up doors for me in any respect, majorly. So they're not life-changing things. They're pieces of paper. You still walk away the same person you walked into that show as. And ultimately, I think my sort of mindset and mantra has probably changed. Once you get a partner, once you then look to build a family and that kind of things, does the risk really weigh up things? I don't think so. For me personally, and this is obviously no comment on anyone that does. Obviously, everyone makes their decision. Yeah, makes their decision and each their own, which is absolutely fine. I respect everyone's decision to that. Make what they want to do. But for me, it's just not worth it. But however, if you had asked me this 5, 6, 7 years ago, might have had a different response. But yeah, with everything in life at the minute, it's kind of like, what benefit is that actually going to give me? Probably nothing. Probably nothing.
That was one thing that Dean McKillop talked a lot about in one of the previous episodes, was like the cost benefit. And that's like the decision he has to make on a daily basis with a lot of his clients as to whether, we increase drugs or we bump up food or manipulate training. But I think that's a really mature way to look at things, I guess, through the lens of your health, family. How is this going to serve you if you had an A and B pro card versus an IFBB pro card? But one thing I did talk to Dean about was, I think there is some discussions around having like an IFBB natural, like category or sort of
Yeah.
arm to the federation. What are your thoughts around that? Have you heard any inklings around that?
Yeah. So obviously there's the IFBB Australia Season B shows that are going to be, so the mid-year shows, they're going to be the natural shows. So in July of this year, there's going to be, I think it's Melbourne, Sydney, and Gold Coast from memory, are going to be natural shows in July. So they've obviously got different criteria for what is quote unquote natural. They might not have the 10-year, drug-free ban. I think it's only 3 years. I also go back and revert back to, you win a pro card. So these aren't pro qualifiers yet, but in future there will be. You win an IFBB pro card as a natural, let's say as a bodybuilder or a classic physique. Like, what does that actually do for you? Like, there's no natural pro shows out there. Well, I think there's obviously one IFBB natural pro show. They're obviously going to build up on that. What's that actually giving you, as opposed to, like, you're not going to make it to the Olympia. Like, I'm, as a natural bodybuilder, you're not making it to the open men's bodybuilding Olympia. Like, you're not going to stand up against Big Ramy and fucking Samson, are you? So I still think there's a big way to come up in terms of the IFBB to match federations like your WNBF, your INBA and that kind of thing, because they put on some pretty spectacular shows. So I even think back to WNBF, the Worlds. There was almost 400 competitors from 65 different countries, and you just think, wow, that's like a huge show in itself. Can the IFBB, and I'm sure they absolutely can, like, you think of the resources they have, can they build up a almost a different level of like you've obviously got your enhanced level of shows and classes and and all of that. Can you do the same thing for naturals? Like, is that
Yeah.
what they're trying to do, or do you want to try and bridge the gap and join them together? Because if that's what you're trying to do, you're never going to get anywhere as a natural bodybuilder in the enhanced shows.
Well, I guess if you said who's got the lion's share of all the money in bodybuilding in the world, the IFBB would be the
Oh, hands down.
biggest, hands down. So if there is the ability to fund more rigorous drug testing, it would be through the IFBB, right? So if anyone has the
Absolutely.
power to elevate, how rigorously athletes are tested in a natural competition, I think that would be the way to go. And the way I'm looking at things is I'm thinking, well, are we in the current context, like the generation we're in, are we heading down the path of like the more and more people? Because obviously the IFBB and Mr. Olympia, it's all about the freak factor, right? That's what people are there to watch. Like it's just insane, and that's what people love seeing. But when's it going to get to a point where people are going to start? We're going to see more and more and more deaths, or people with their health being compromised to the point where we start to go, right, well, we need to maybe have another outlet or avenue for people who want to compete into later life. Because for you, natural bodybuilding into your 60s or 70s as a masters athlete might even be something that brings you a lot of fulfillment and joy in later life. And
Absolutely.
if you're smashing PEDs all through your 20s and 30s and 40s, like there's going to come a time with your family where I imagine a lot of people, like you see Chris Bumstead, how he's retired, but depending on how hard and how long you push it, you really need to weigh up like the cost benefits of all those drugs they're taking, I guess.
Absolutely. So I think I suppose you make a good point there in sort of like that cost benefit, and is it even worth it for you? So don't get me wrong. I think the IFBB and like they've done it with like all the new classes that they've added over the years. They've nailed them all. They don't make bad decisions. So no doubt, whatever route the IFBB go down in terms of natural side of things, they're going to make a good decision. They're going to make sure it's well resourced, it's well ran. Obviously, it'll be obviously in the US to start with, and obviously it's clearly filtering down into other countries. So whatever avenues there can be to promote more natural bodybuilding in that natural space, I think can only be better. Because yeah, you talk about the freaks. I just think back to the what I call the freaks at the WMBF Worlds. I don't know how much you saw of that, but there were some incredible physiques there that you think, yeah, it was just like stuff that you just like. This is top tier. This is your Phil Heath back double bicep equivalent
Yeah.
of natural bodybuilding. It's just yeah, not even a close thing that I've seen before.
It was incredible. Yeah, I saw it. Evan Godby, who's actually um, episode 14 of the podcast. He's a WMBF pro, but he was basically saying like he's coming to a point now where he's just happy going to worlds in a pro show and placing, getting in the top 10 almost. The caliber of the athletes there is insane now.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's
All
pretty
right, mate.
crazy.
Well, it's been actually a real pleasure chatting to you today. Just before we wind things up, I just want to maybe discuss some of your goals or the things you're looking forward to coming out of this current season. What are your priorities? What things are you trying to improve upon, or you're trying to take a little bit of time away from the bodybuilding, kind of set things up with your family?
Yep. Yeah, good question. So, obviously, the initial thought, it's only been 6 weeks yesterday since the show, so it's purely just to get healthy. Get some body weight back on, get my health markers in a good spot. That's the main priority post comp. Get training back to a good spot where I'm feeling healthy, strong, and being able to progressively overload across the board. That's a big focus for me. Obviously, looking to get more into the natural bodybuilding space. That sort of kickstarted with the A and B, get into the judging side of things, which I think will be pretty awesome. Get a feel and test for that, which I'm quite honoured to be asked to go judge in that federation. So I appreciate the crew there. obviously got the outside of all of that, got the family starting, got the new boy on the way, the young boy on the way at the end of March, which will be exciting. So that's obviously going to consume a lot of my time. Not that that will, stop any of the, the bodybuilding side of things, but I think, that will, take a back seat for the interim. And yeah, I wouldn't envisage I'll be on stage before, I don't know, I'm going to say 2027, but who knows? It might be a bit longer, might be a bit shorter. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, mate. Well, I think now that you become a pro, that's like the caliber of athletes. If you go to the DFRAC Worlds or anything like that, you're going to have to go up another
Yeah.
gear again. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I think that does play into my mind of like I'm reaching that point where like a good 3-4 year off season might do me well when I want to step up on a pro stage and not look like a fish out of water. So we'll have to give it some time off to build for that.
yeah, for sure. Well, congratulations with everything you achieved this year, and for the little one, is probably your proudest achievement of all of them on the way.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, it's been good chatting with you, mate, and thanks for your time today. We'll have to get you back on. Jen messaged me to organise a podcast from A and B, so we'll have to have potentially get some others involved and do a bit of a round table or something of that nature. But thanks again for your time today, mate.
No problem. Appreciate you asking me on, and love what you're doing. And you've had some great guests on, so I'm honoured that you've asked me. So appreciate that, mate, and looking forward to chatting at a future point.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Strength Connect podcast. If you enjoyed listening, please don't forget to rate the podcast or subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips from each episode. You can also find us on all social media platforms using the handle @StrengthConnect.